So once you come to lie down on your mat, just draw your knees in towards your chest. Take your hands to the tops of your shins or knees. And we're just going to pause here for a few rounds of breath. Noticing the quality of your inhales and exhales this morning. If there are any sticky spots, can you just back off a little bit, ease up a little bit. If you want, you can start to draw your knees in a little bit closer, getting a little bit more rounding into your spine. If that's too much for the front of your hips, totally fine. Maybe rocking from side to side. Just trying to open up the muscles along the spine of the mid and lower back. And then we'll take the knees a little bit closer to the armpits and come into a happy baby. Either hands can come to the backs of your thighs and you'll extend your lower legs up, or first two fingers to big toes, or all fingers to outer edges of the feet. Any variation, and you'll notice there's this natural rounding of your spine as your hips begin to flex more deeply. Tops of the thighs aiming for the floor on either side of your body. Feet facing the ceiling. And then with your next out breath, just let your heels come back in towards your groin. And we're going to bring our feet back to the floor for just a few moments. With an inhale, I want you to use your lower belly to actually tip your pelvis forward. So often we think of using the muscles of the back to come into an anterior tilt. But I want you to see if you can use your lower belly as opposed to the back. And then keeping that action in the lower belly, hug your pelvis back into that posterior tilt, all the way until you can start to feel your lower spine rounding down into the floor. And so again, initiating it from the deep core muscles, the lower belly, see if you can find an anterior tilt. So here in this anterior tilt, by initiating from the lower belly, we're trying to connect pelvic floor and abdominal action together, trying to integrate all of that. And we keep that as we hug the pelvis into that posterior tilt. Let's do it one more time. Think about engaging your lower belly as you come into that anterior tilt, a little space between the low back and the floor, and then exhale, posterior tilt, lower back rounding down into the mat. And we're going to hold this position. For today, we're going to think about integrating from the pelvic floor all the way to the ribs. From the deepest muscles all the way down towards your back, all the way up to the surface. So all of that co-contracting and working together. And we're going to try to keep our midsection from popping up towards the ceiling. We're going to try to keep everything relatively flat, even those lowest ribs. The lowest ribs of the body have a tendency to want to pop up when we're doing core work. So I want you to think about connecting your ribs to the muscles of your core. Keeping that rounding into your spine, we're going to lift both feet off of the mat. And even just lifting the feet, you might notice that belly wanted to pop up and lower back really wanted to seize up, to contract. So we're going to try to relax that while we engage the front body, find that integration. Everything relatively on the same plane, as flat as we can anatomically get it, right? Anatomical reality. So we're going to keep that. Keep that posterior tilt. We're thinking hugging hip bones closer to ribs and ribs closer to hip bones. And we're just going to tap the left foot down to the floor. With control, hips stay steady. We're going to bring that left foot back up to starting point nice and slow. So it's all about staying really still in your pelvis, really anchoring down through your back body. And we'll do the same thing with the right foot. Right foot comes down. And then we come back up. And we're going to alternate like that, just continuing left foot and then right, going nice and slow and keeping that integration not only on the way down, but also on the way back up. So we're awakening the muscles of the core from those deeper layers all the way up to the surface and trying to inform those muscles what we want them to do to keep our back safe and to keep engaged. And then we'll let that lead us into the rest of our practice soon. Couple more rounds like this. Let's do one more per side. And then when you finish your last round, you can hug your knees into your chest again and just pause there. Take a couple of deep breaths. So for our next set of warming up our core, integrating our midsection, we're going to use those same concepts of hugging ribs and hip bones closer to each other, of trying to keep everything anchoring down and in, nice compact midsection, while staying soft in the back so that we're not overly pinching those paraspinal muscles, holding that posterior tilt. So we're going to start the same way we did with these tabletop knees. Your left knee is going to stay just like it is, and we're going to extend the right leg straight out and take it down to the floor. So the back of your right heel is pushing down into the floor, and you can take a peek at your right foot and make sure it's not collapsing in or out. We want it to look just like it would if you were standing on one foot, ankle bent to a square. And then take your fingertips to your back body and check in with your lower spine. Is it now arching away from the floor? So you put this right leg into extension, which means your lower back may be wanting to kick in. But we want the lower back to stay nice and quiet for now. And we're going to use those deep core muscles, integrating ribs down to pelvis and pelvis up to ribs. So I want you to take your left hand to the right side of your waist and just feel along that line and see if you can get all of that to connect together. Keep it nice and flat. And then we're going to extend the right arm up and back. Maybe the tip of your right thumb comes to the floor. And we're just going to hold here for a few rounds of breath. We're holding this isometric contraction of hip bones to ribs, keeping those ribs down. The hand on the front of your body is a nice reminder of what's happening there in your body. We're trying to keep the lower back rounding down into the floor. And we'll hold here for 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Keep that engagement as you lift your right leg and hover. 5, 4, 3, 2, and on 1, draw the right knee back in. You can take your hands to your shins, take a couple of deep breaths. So we'll be doing that same thing on the second side. We're going to find that integration of the front body from the surface all the way down, from the deep muscles all the way up. Try to prevent that lower belly from popping up by hugging everything down and firm. And this time it will be the left leg that's going to extend out. So you're going to extend your left leg forward, place the back of your heel to the floor, and I want you to check in with your back. Make sure your lower back is rounding down into the mat. Take a peek at your left foot. Make sure it's pointing up straight instead of out to one side or the other. And then with your right hand, you can place it to your belly and check in with those muscles in the ribs. Make sure everything's connecting together, ribs to hips, hips to ribs. And we're going to keep that as we extend the left arm up and back, reaching out to those left fingertips and out to the left foot. And we're going to hold here. With every in and out breath, we're going to maintain those actions of hugging ribs and hip bones together, of keeping those muscles down, trying not to let them pop up towards the ceiling, and keeping that lower back rounding down into the floor. And we'll be here for 5, 4, 3, 2, and on 1, keep that engagement. Hover your left leg off the floor. 5, 4, 3, 2, and on 1, rebend the left knee. Woo, hug your knees into your chest, rock it out. And then we're going to place our feet back down to the floor. Walk your feet forward a little bit so that you're in a little bit longer stance, not quite so tight of a bend in the backs of your knees. And then we're going to take the backs of the heels to the floor, both of them this time, while keeping a little bend in the knees. So even here, we want that integration of ribs and hip bones on the same plane, so your ribs are not popping up higher than the hips. We want to keep the belly calm here, not let it pop up towards the ceiling. And we're going to start to engage that posterior chain. So from glutes through hamstrings all the way to the backs of the knees, right? So arms can take whatever position is comfortable. Maybe fingertips just rest the floor. Maybe you want to take bridge pose, preparatory arms. And we're going to practice hugging the backs of the heels towards the backs of the hips, and the backs of the hips towards the backs of the knees. So those are our chains of action. Heels are going to hug towards the hips. Hips are going to hug toward the backs of the knees. And then we're going to press down to the backs of the heels and see if we can lift the hips off the floor, even just an inch or so, to really fire up those hamstrings. Make sure kneecaps are pointing towards the ceiling. And we're going to hold here for 5, 4, 3, 2, and on 1, go ahead and lower down. You can place your feet flat to the floor once more. Roll to your side and use the strength of your top hand to press up away from the mat. And we're going to meet in tabletop, hands and knees. And here's where we're going to start applying that integration to the rest of our practice. So even though the orientation has changed, we're now facing the floor, we want to try to think of hugging the ribs up away from the floor, closer to the center of your body. Thinking hugging hip bones and ribs closer together so that we avoid letting the ribs pop out and arching into the lumbar spine, but instead we knit all of that together. Keep it super firm. Walk your knees back a couple of inches, and with your toes tucked under, let's come to plank pose, top of a push-up. Keeping that integration, I want you to start to push down to the base of your thumbs where they meet your wrists, and broaden out through your upper arms. Keep your gaze slightly forward, and we're going to bend our elbows and lower halfway down. Strong through the hands and core, press back up to plank. And again like that, lower halfway down. Inhale back to plank pose. And one more like that, halfway down. Inhale back up. Exhale, downward facing dog pose. Here in downward facing dog, we're going to go for those same actions. We don't have to be at 100% effort in the front body, but we want to try to think ribs tucked in just a bit so they're not popping out towards the floor. We're heavy through the base of the thumbs and broadening out through the upper arms. Couple rounds of breath here. And then we're going to shift forward back into that plank pose. Adjust the length of your stance if needed, and find that integration. We're coming into a side plank. So you'll be on the outer edge of your right foot and on your right hand. You can also come down to your forearm if that's better for you. You can start with your left foot in front, or you can go ahead and stack it on top of the right. But it's that integration of ribs to hips, hips to ribs, hugging everything nice and firm, real compact in your front body, heavy through your right thumb. And we're going to start to press the outer edge of the right foot down into the floor a little bit to engage that outer hip and glute. Couple breaths here. And then a controlled unwind back to plank. Knees can come down, and you'll shift your hips back and let your forearms rest down to the mat. Coming back to your hands and knees position, we're going to set up for that side plank on the second side. So either on your hand or your forearm, you'll be on your left side. So left foot, left upper body. Right foot can be in front for support or on top. And we want to integrate the left ribs, the left hip bones, really hugging them firm together. Those left obliques, the left side of your waist, are really engaged. And then we start to anchor the left foot down towards the floor, really engaging that outer hip and glute. Couple breaths here. And then a controlled unwind back to center. And we'll find downward facing dog once more. From your downward facing dog, come forward to plank one more time. We're going to stay our plank. Find that integrated core and then lower halfway down. Inhale back up. Two more like that, halfway down. Inhale back up. And again, halfway down. Inhale back up. Exhale your knees to the floor. Inhale to extend your spine into your cow pose. Exhale, rounding into your spine for cat. Two more like that. Inhale, cow. Exhale, cat. And one more time. Coming to your neutral spine, walk your left fingertips away from you just a bit, and we're going to thread a right arm underneath the left, bringing the back of the hand and arm down to the floor. Your left elbow will stay bent, and you can take your gaze up underneath that elbow. Breathing into the sides of your ribs. I want you to think about keeping a little bit of softness in the muscles of your back and a little bit of engagement in your front body. Planting that left hand, heavy through the thumb and broad through the shoulder. We press down to unwind back to center. And we'll come in for one more set of cow-cat. Extending your spine with your in-breath. Flexing your spine with your out-breath. Two more rounds like that. Coming to your neutral spine, we're going to set up for that same twist. You'll be walking your right fingertips out just a bit to thread the left arm underneath the right. The back of your left hand and arm come down. And just like on the first side, we want to think a little bit of lift in those lowest ribs, a little bit of engagement in the obliques, and a little more softness in the muscles of the spine. You'll be planting your right palm and rooting down to unwind back up to your hands and knees position. And from there, you'll tuck your toes under and come back to downward facing dog. From your downward facing dog, I want you to keep your hips super still. Keep that sense of integration, and we're just going to start to extend the right leg slowly up and back. That's the only thing moving here. And we're gonna hold this three-legged dog just for a couple of breaths. And then with an exhale, slowly shift forward, bringing your right knee to your right upper arm. And we'll inhale back into that three-legged dog. This time, right knee to left inner elbow. Inhaling it back. And then with our next exhale, we're gonna bring the foot down to the mat. Step it down somewhere near your right hand. And we're gonna spin our left heel down to set up for a warrior two pose. Once you're feeling steady, inhale up right into warrior two. So even in this asymmetrical lunge, that integration comes into play. So we want hip bones and rib bones in line with each other. We want our sternum and our pubic bone to be in line with each other. There's a little bit of lift and tone there as we root down through our feet. Couple breaths here in Virabhadrasana 2. Take your left hand to your left rib cage. And we're going to use the outer right butt cheek to hug the right thigh back, and your right leg will start to straighten. So as we extend this back leg and hinge in the front hip, your lower back may want to hinge as well. So we want to try to keep that integration, starting to really firm up the right side of the waist. That's going to be the supporting side. Extend your right arm out until you can't reach any further. And then you can bring the back of your hand to your shin, or fingertips can come to the floor or prop. Whichever position you're placing your hand in, I want you to be light on the fingertips. We're not using this hand to support the pose. Remember, it's about your pelvis integrating with your midsection, really using those right obliques. We're firm through the feet, but the middle of your body is super important here. Breathing into your left hand. A few more breaths like that. And then go ahead and extend your left arm straight up. And then keeping that length, we're going to take the left arm forward and all the way down to the floor. We'll eventually square off our hips and pick that left heel back up off the mat. You might want to shorten your stance just a couple of inches. And with a little bend in that back knee, we're going to come up for a crescent lunge. Integrating even here. So if you're the type of person, and I'm this type of person, who can very easily find a deep curve in the lumbar spine, that might mean that we're disconnecting the front body. So we've got to bring that back together and keep that. Rooting down through your feet, extend your arms up, and we're going to tap the left knee down towards the floor. And then inhale back to crescent. 2 more times like that, just tap the left knee down. Inhale back up, and 1 more, tap the left knee down. Inhale back up. Hands to heart center, and you'll step your left foot forward, coming into mountain pose Tadasana. Even here, integration, ribs and hips on the same plane, sternum and pubic bone on the same plane. So we're going to be practicing some squats. It's fierce pose variations, really. We're going to do them a little bit differently than we've been doing in previous practices recently. So your feet will be outer hip distance apart, just like normal. We'll be shifting our hips back in space, staying rooted through the soles of the feet. We'll put a little bend in our knees. And then I want you to, without moving your feet and without moving your knees, try to scrunch your mat up, like it was you were to bunch it up or make your mat shorter. Squeeze. So inner thighs, all the way down to the knees should be firing up, and you might even feel the inner arches of your feet, but you also might feel some activity in the outer upper thighs as well. So we're gonna keep that squeeze as we take a few reps of squats. So exhale down into your squat, keep squeezing in and rise all the way up to straight legs. And then we're gonna exhale into the squat, squeeze, 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 rise up to straight legs. So we're gonna do 6 more like that. For me, when I start to bend deeply into my knees, it's really hard for me to keep that sense of hugging in. Two more like that, keep squeezing in. Last one. And then we're gonna come to that squat. You can take your hands to heart center for stability. There's a sense of squeezing in, but I want you to shift your weight to the right and start to push down through your right foot. Left big toes are gonna be real light on the floor. And I want you to press through your right foot and see if you can come up to stand. And then we'll see if we can come back to that squat, just tapping the left toe down. 2 more like that. Rising up to stand, we're gonna pause there. Your right hand will come to your left knee, your left arm out to the side, and we're gonna take a little twist. It's that same squeezing action that we used in the squats. A slow, controlled unwind back to center, hands to heart center. I want you to sit back in that squat, but we're gonna let the left leg extend back and come all the way down. Both hands come back down to the mat. Your left hand stays down and your right arm reaches up. In this twisted lunge, push your right heel down into the floor and let the top of your right thigh bone where it meets the hip anchor down. Next out breath, top hand comes down, and we're gonna make our way to plank pose, tapping push up. So we've had some opportunities to practice that half lowering down, half coming back up. And if that was too much, knees can always come down to the floor, or you can leave your legs straight. We're gonna shift forward just slightly and very slowly lower all the way down. And we'll set up our first cobra pose. So tops of the feet flat to the floor. We're going to engage from glutes down. So from the top of your butt cheeks, I want you to start to hug down all the way through your hamstrings. Think of hugging down towards your feet. And then inhale, extending your spine, keeping that sense of anchoring down to the backs of the legs and butt. And exhale, chest back down to the floor. Tuck your toes under, lift your hips and belly, press back up to tabletop, and we'll meet in downward facing dog. So in our downward facing dog, hips are stable. The only thing that's gonna move for now is that left leg. And we're gonna very slowly start to extend it up and back for three-legged dog. And we'll just hold there for a few breaths. With your next out breath, shift forward and bring that left knee towards the left upper arm. Inhale to re-extend. This time, left knee will come to right inner elbow. And inhale it back. And then we'll be bringing the foot down to the mat. We're setting up for that warrior two. So right heel spins down. Once you're feeling steady, inhale up right. And we want to think of stacking everything on top of each other. So shoulders over hips, hip bones and ribs on the same plane, sternum and pubic bone on the same plane. If I get too much of that anterior tilt and arching in my lower spine, Then my pelvis starts to tip forward, and then my sternum is in front of my pubic bone. So I want to, for my body, bring that back to neutral. It feels like some abdominal engagement, but that's what I have to do to keep everything on the same plane. And if you haven't already, arms extend out. A few breaths here. Right hand comes to the right ribs, and we're going to use this left outer hip and glute to hug the thigh bone back, and the left leg will start to straighten. So really integrating that left side of the waist, firming up those obliques. We're going to start to reach out to the left arm until we can't reach any further. And then back of the hand can come to the shin, or fingertips can come to the floor or a prop. Make sure that you're light on your hand. We want much of the support to come from those transverse abdominis and oblique muscles. Breathing into the right side of the ribs. If you haven't already, go ahead and extend your right arm straight up. We're going to keep this length as we start to bring the right arm forward and bring it all the way down to the floor. Once it comes down, you can square up your hips and lift that back heel. Maybe shorten your stance a couple of inches. You'll put a bend in your right knee, and we'll come up for that crescent lunge. Extending your arms up, keeping everything on the same plane. We're going to start to tap the right knee down to the floor, and then come back up. 2 more like that. Tap it down, and back up, and again, tap it down, and back up. Hands can come to heart center, and we're going to step the back foot forward, coming into that mountain pose. We're setting up for another round of our squats, so make sure your feet are out of hip distance and parallel. In the last round, we practiced hugging in, right? Engaging what we call the adductors, like adding things together, adding your thighs together, even though we didn't let them touch. So in this set, we're going to practice abduction. That's taking away or coming away from the midline, and we're going to initiate that from the outer hips. So instead of trying to squeeze your mat together like an accordion, I want you to think of stretching your mat out to the right and left, or stretching your floor out, whatever image you need to get. So you're going to bend your knees, hips are going to sit back, and without moving your feet or your knees, I want you to energetically widen apart. So a lot of activity here, okay? And we're going to keep that sense of widening apart as we move through another set of 8, okay? So sit a little more deeply. Keep widening it apart. Push down through your feet. Inhale back upright. Exhale into your squat. Keep that sense of stretching things apart and rise back upright. 6 more like that. Three more. So we're going to come back into the squat. We're going to pause there. Hands can come to heart center. We'll be shifting our weight into the left foot. So now we're not only widening apart through that outer left hip, but really pushing down to the left heel and the sole of the foot. Right big toes in front just for support. And we're going to see if we can press to that standing foot and rise up to stand. And then sink back into the one-legged squat. 2 more like that. Pausing here on your standing leg. Left hand comes to the outer right knee, right arm out to the side. And we're going to take a little twist to the right. A slow, controlled unwind back to center. Hands can come to heart center. You're going to sit back into that left glute, but let your right foot start to reach behind you until it comes down to the floor. And then we'll extend the arms up. Exhale, hands back down to the mat. So your right hand is going to stay down for that twisted lunge. I want you to anchor your left heel down and let your left thigh bone anchor down a bit, and then extend your left arm up. Keep pushing actively that left heel into the floor. Next out breath, top arm comes back down, left hand to the mat. We'll step it back to plank pose. You can go straight to downward facing dog, or you can lower down through your chaturanga. Inhale into your cobra. Think about those glutes, top down engagement. And then we'll all meet in downward facing dog. And from here, lower knees down, coming into a child's pose. Let's take a few resting breaths. Might be a good time to get a sip of water. So we have one more standing sequence. And I want you to think about these actions of engaging from the glutes down to the hamstrings, the concept of not only hugging in, but also widening out. So inner and outer thighs are engaged equally. That integration of front body while staying a little bit more calm in the muscles of the back, okay? We'll be starting from downward facing dog. With an in breath, extend your right leg up and back. Everything else super stable. Put a little bend in your right knee. And I want you to rotate your right hip away from the center. The lift should come from that outer right hip. It's like the abduction, right? So stretching the mat longer with your body, it's that in this right leg. We're just going to hold here for a few breaths. And then you can square everything up and re-extend the knee straight. With your next exhale, the right foot comes forward. You're going to spin your left heel down, but this time we're coming into side angle pose. So you have options, either forearm to the thigh or right arm inside the right leg. Your fingertips can just be hanging down towards the floor, or you can rest them all the way to the floor or a prop. Either way is fine. We want to stay full in the back and in this left side of the rib cage, breathing into the left hand. You're going to turn your ribs to the left. And we're just going to breathe here. Your right hand is going to come outside your right leg, or you can bring your hand to your shin. As we re-straighten that right leg, we're setting up for one more round of Trikonasana, triangle pose. So really integrating that front body and the right side of your waist. Maybe you can extend your right arm out. Maybe left arm comes overhead, parallel to the right. 3, 2, on 1, take your gaze to the floor, take your hands to the floor, take your right hand outside your right foot, and we're going to square up the hips a little bit so we can bring the left foot in about 8 to 10 inches, so we're setting up for pyramid pose. Just a few rounds of breath here, really anchoring down through the tripod of the foot. So that's the base of the big toe, pinky toe, and the heel. Right hand can come back inside the right foot, and we're gonna come into that three-legged dog again. We're nicely anchored through the left foot because we've shortened our stance a bit. Put a little bend in your right knee. Rotate your right hip away from your center. So you can stay here, or you can shift forward and step that right foot behind you, coming into a wild thing. You may want to extend your left foot out a little bit. Here, we're really pressing through the right heel, and there's a sense of that tugging in with the inner thighs, but also expanding out, just like in the squats. You can practice those actions here. If you haven't already, a controlled unwind back to center. And we're gonna meet in a three-legged dog. Right foot comes forward. This time we're coming into warrior two. Left hand to your left hip. So we're gonna put all that together, strengthen the glutes, integrating the core, taking it slow and steady to transition into half moon pose. So if you want to use a prop, you can take it with you. It'll be right hand, right foot. We're going to reach forward a little bit. You can shorten your stance a little bit. Make sure you're not too close to the furniture. And then we'll step up onto that right foot. Your right hand will start to come down towards the floor or to your prop. And here it's that abduction, that lift from the outer left hip and glutes. As we root down to the standing foot. In your standing leg, it's more of that adduction. It's the inner thigh. Squeezing in. Hand can stay to hip or arm can extend up. Gaze comes back to the floor for stability. And we're going to make our way back into warrior two. Once you find your warrior two, turn your right palm to face the ceiling and reverse your warrior, light on those left fingertips. And then we'll exhale, windmill hands down to the floor. Pause. Take your right foot out to the right just a bit so you can lower your left knee down to this low lunge. You can stay here, or you can take your right arm up and back and pick up your left foot, finding the foot with your hand. So for the past week or so, we've been really working on waking up those hamstrings. And you can practice that here. So your foot's pretty close to your butt. I want you to actively hug your foot into your butt. And then see if you can keep it there even when you let go of your hand. If it feels a little crampy, that's normal. And then we'll very slowly unwind, bringing that right hand back down to the floor. And you're going to walk your right foot to the left just a bit to lower the shin down. We're setting up for a pigeon prep. Back toes are going to be tucked under for today. And here in our pigeon prep, I want you to actively press your right shin down into the floor. Find that integration of your front body. And then you can stay up on your fingers, or you can come down to your forearms. A few rounds of breath here. Since all of you are on your forearms, I can actually see that. We're going to roll with it, okay? So with your forearms, I want you to press down from elbows to wrists. There is a sense of rotating your upper arms externally. So biceps are pointing towards the short edge of your mat. With your left toes tucked under, I want you to lift your left knee away from the floor and then send your right foot back to meet the left forearm plank. Find that integration and we'll hold here. 5, 4, 3, 2, come back up to your regular plank, and you can go straight to downward facing dog, or you can move through your plank Chaturanga Cobra series and meet us back in downward facing dog. From your downward facing dog, extend your left leg up, put a little bend in the knee, and rotate your left hip away from your center. And we'll just hold here. Squaring off the hips and then re-straightening that left leg. Exhale, left foot forward. We're setting up for our side angle pose. So either forearm to thigh or left arm inside the leg with fingertips hanging down or resting to the floor or prop. Right hand comes to the right ribs, and I want you to breathe into that right hand. A few breaths here. Think about that squeezing in of the inner thighs, especially with your front leg. And with your back leg, it's the stretching of the mat longer. Left hand can come to the shin or outside the left leg. We're going to hug the left leg towards straight. Triangle pose. Long, strong left waistline. And then from there, maybe we extend the left arm forward. Maybe that right arm comes forward parallel to the left, and we'll hold here. 3, 2, and on 1, both hands come down. We're going to square off the hips and shorten our stance a little bit so that that right heel can come down to the floor for pyramid pose. Anchoring down to the base of the big toe, pinky toe, and heel. And then rebending that left knee a little bit. You might want to bring your hand inside the foot for the transition, maybe even stepping the right foot back a bit. We're going to meet in a three-legged dog, and we'll find that bend in the left knee and rotating the hip away from the center. You can stay here, or shifting forward a bit, step your left foot behind you, coming into your wide vein. There's a deep bend in the left knee, but both glutes are engaged, pressing down to the feet. A controlled unwind back to center, and we'll meet in that three-legged dog with the left leg up and back. And then we'll bring the foot forward. This time we're setting up for warrior 2. And we're using our warrior 2 as an important road stop on our way to half moon. So we're setting up the foundation for a solid transition with this front foot engaging up into the glutes. Already this back leg is integrated into your body, right? It's not this loose appendage hanging out. It's part of you. So we're going to keep that. You can use a prop or bring your hand straight to the floor. And we'll step it up nice and slow. Coming onto that left foot, and left hand makes its way down. Hugging in with the left inner thigh as you root down through the left foot. Really reaching, lifting from the outer right hip is the outer tip of that little crease underneath your right butt cheek. Gaze comes back to the floor, and we're going to transition back into warrior two. Left palm turns to face the ceiling, reverse that warrior, really light on those right fingertips. And then with an out breath, windmill your hands down to the floor, square it up. You can heel toe that left foot out just a bit and lower your right knee down. So we can stay here in this low lunge, or we can take that left arm up and back and perhaps find the right foot. So if you have the foot in your hand, I want you to actively hug your foot towards your butt and see if you can keep it there even when you let go. A controlled unwind back down to the mat, and we'll make our way into our pigeon press. So take your left foot back to the right just a couple of inches so you can lower your shin down to the floor. Right toes are going to stay tucked under for today. We're integrating, so everything on the same plane, avoiding that excessive arch in the lower back. We're actively pressing down to the left shin. And then keeping that, we can start to walk forward so that we lower the elbows down and in. A few breaths here. So with these right toes tucked under, we can lift the right knee off the floor. And then we can let that left foot reach back to meet the right for a forearm plank. And we'll hold here. 5, 4, 3, 2, and on 1, this time let's just lower the hips down. Release the tops of your feet. Anchor from the glutes down to the hamstrings, and let's find a little Sphinx pose here. Let your elbows come out to the sides, and let your forehead come down to the floor. From here, we're just going to roll over onto our backs. So you can just roll over, lying down on your back body. Sometimes I have to inchworm back onto my mat. I'm like an infant. You know how infants somehow make their way to like the far corner of the crib, even though they can't crawl? Somehow that happens to me when I'm practicing. I end up half off the mat. So that happened just now. All right, so knees bent, feet to the floor. Just lift your hips up and over the right a couple of inches, and we're going to take a twist with knees over to the left. Your left hand can come to the top of your right thigh or knee. Pick up your left shoulder blade and get it out from underneath you. And then take your gaze to the ceiling. Here, it's that calm paraspinal muscles, letting the muscles of your front body bring you into the twist instead of pulling yourself with your back. Coming back to center. Center your hips first, and then you can lift your hips up and over to the left just a couple of inches. Take your knees over to the right. Right hand comes to the top of the left knee or thigh. Get that right shoulder blade out from underneath you and take your gaze to the ceiling. Coming back to center. Center your hips. We're making our way into our brief streaming Shavasana time. So you're welcome to go ahead and extend your legs out and take your arms alongside your body, coming into a traditional Shavasana posture. If this is not really ideal for you and the setting there of your home, then an alternative would be to press up to a sit and take a seated meditation instead. Once you've chosen a position that you can be comfortable in for the next minute, just allow the muscles of your face to soften. And taking that softening in a little further, focus on your eyebrows. Softening from your third eye all the way out to the outer corners of your brow. Down into the outer corners of your eyes. As your mind is pulled away from your body and from this moment, acknowledge whatever it is that's distracting you, and then just invite your mind back to your body and to this sense of softness. You're welcome to stay in your Shavasana as long as you'd like. If you need to move on, go ahead and rebend your knees, placing your feet to the floor. Roll to your side and use the strength of your top press up into a seated position.